Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of SUGTalks. I'm Craig Dale, your host, and together with our special guests, we'll take a deep dive into the topics, challenges, and opportunities facing SAP users today. Please make sure you subscribe so you never miss another episode. I'm delighted today to be joined by Nick Parking, CEO of Proceed Group, Tina Rosario, Chief Data Officer for SAP Europe, and Mark Belmore, Material Planning Manager of Ventra at Alstom, which was previously Bombardier Rail, as well as being the chair of the user group's Document and Data Management Special Interest Group. So welcome to you all. I was watching a movie last night, Conspiracy Theory, probably for about the 100th time. It's a movie I absolutely love with Mel Gibson and Julia Roberts. And I'm not sure whether you know it, but it is one of my favourites. And what I'm thinking of is how do I widen my movie watching? So I'd like to ask you to help me out. And what I'd like to know from you is what's one of your favourite movies of all time. And if I may start with you, Tina, please.
Well, I'm a musical kind of gal, so I really like kind of the old school musicals, musical comedies. But particularly close to my heart is Being John Malkovich. It's the movie that
Ah,
I saw on my first date with my husband, so I keep that one close to my heart.
very, a lot of meaning in that one. I don't think I've seen that one, so I will have to
It's
try it.
it's
Thank
really,
you.
really funny and not a musical, but a great
Mm.
cast and John Malkovich, and it's really great.
Yeah, cool. When you said musical at first, I was thinking Calamity Jane. But anyway, uh, Mark.
Oh, that's a very interesting one. Until yesterday, I would have said something along the lines of Armageddon or Deep Impact. But yesterday, I actually sat down and watched Bohemian Rhapsody
Mm.
on
Ah,
one of our
yeah.
streaming providers, and I've got to admit that has very, very quickly become my now favourite film, or should I say, my post fourth or fifth lockdown favourite film.
No, excellent. So we've moved on from disasters to
So
a film with, but it does have a very uplifting ending as well, doesn't it? Bohemian Rhapsody. Excellent movie. Excellent. And Nick.
Well, as a great motor racing fan, and I'm going to show my age here. 1966, the movie Grand Prix with James Gardner and Steve McQueen is
Oh,
one of my all time favourites. Watching that.
oh wow, a classic, a classic. Oh, thank you all very much. Well, there's two there. I don't think I've seen Grand Prix, and I haven't seen Being John Malkovich. So thank you. You've helped me widen my movie watching. So I appreciate that. And now we'll move on to our topic of discussion, which is the importance of data. In a recent podcast, we were discussing the road to S4 HANA, and the importance of data preparedness was brought up within that conversation. And also, if I reflect back to last year when we did our data symposium, which we had as an online event, which you all participated in, having a data strategy was highlighted within those discussions as being very important. So, if I may, I'd like to start with you, Tina, and just ask you,
Mhm.
why is having a data strategy important?
Yeah. I mean, certainly today we're seeing more and more companies accelerate digital adoption. And with that comes new data, more data, third-party data, data that needs to be integrated. And so there's certainly a demand there, while at the same time, companies are looking to drive efficiencies and cutting costs and maximizing value from assets like data. And then on top of that, there's not typically a dramatic increase in data management budgets. And so, as a result of all of that, we're seeing the need for focus. And that's where the data strategy comes in, is that enabling companies to target and align specific data capabilities to what's most important to the business, what's most important to drive value. And so having a data strategy is important to allow that focus and the ability to generate returns and business value from the investments that companies are making on data. And so targeting data that matters the most, that includes data that would enable business processes such as the move for S/4HANA, but also data that validates market assumptions, where we're at today, where companies are needing to shift and change strategies. They're looking to data to validate those assumptions and provide those insights. And then on top of that, in looking at the most important data and focusing there, but then there also comes the need for specific capabilities and approaches to how you manage that data, right? With an aligned roadmap, with common processes, with synchronization, with data culture and data literacy. And that all needs to be done in a way that's easily understood. And so you need a strategy to help you formulate your thoughts around that. How are you going to manage this most important data? What are the capabilities that are needed? And then how are you going to scale that and repeat that as the business shifts and changes and pivots? And so it's kind of all of that together, right? It's about knowing what's most important to the business and focusing on that, building out a broad set of enterprise-wide capabilities. And hopefully all of this will result in having trustworthy, high-valued, high-quality data that the business needs.
Thank you,
You can't
Tina.
really do that without a strategy, right?
Yeah, very true, very true. And Nick, anything to add there?
Well, I'd say yes, Craig. I mean, when we started archiving people's systems 20 years ago, people, would say to people, "How big is your system?" And they'd say, "Oh, we've got a 500 gig system." We go, "Oh, that's big." Today, we're seeing companies that have got 40, 60 terabytes of data going to S4 with no data strategy. They haven't ever gone back to the business and asked the business to say to them, or say, can we remove some of this data? Can we move it off? So I think really data strategy today is key, especially if you're going to S4 and you want to actually simplify your migration and reduce your TCO.
Thank you. Yeah, very interested on that, and the size and the move, and as Tina mentioned earlier, that if you like the accelerated digital transformations and adoptions, and how that can be impacted by that poor data strategy. And Mark, anything to add on that importance?
I think over time we've become victims of, how can I put it, the reduction of cost of storage. Because storage used to be very expensive at one point, but now you can buy blades for tuppence halfpenny, so to speak, and you can just keep putting them into your servers and into your servers and into your cloud arrays, and you can just keep building and building and building. At the end of the day, we need to flush some of that data out of the systems. Because if we don't flush it out, we're just going to choke on data. We're not going to be able to see what's important for the businesses or the end users moving forward, because it impacts on the end user performance as well. It's something that you see time and time again when you're talking to people as well, is, why is my web browser slow? Well, it's probably because you've got so many cookies and so many temporary web pages sat in your system, in your laptop or in your phone. It's exactly the same in SAP as well. If you keep clogging the tables up and don't clear them out, they're not going to be able to run for you in an optimal way. So it's about that user experience as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. And if I might ask you, Mark, what are the top challenges that customers face in creating a data strategy?
Okay, so I thought about this one about 18 months ago when we sat down during the first document and data management SIG with Mandy and Co down in SAP. And a lot of the feedback that I was receiving, and Nick was in the room at the same time, it was to do with ownership. Yeah, so we've got processes and we've got people and we've got elements of a business that are quite happy sitting away, chunking away, putting purchase orders and sales orders and production orders and things into the systems, taking orders in from web browsers and such alike. But what they're not very good at is saying, well, I've had that for 3 years and I delivered it 2.5 years ago. Do I really need that data in my live system? Yeah. And it's that type of ownership that you don't see within a business. So if we can install that ownership, that then very, very quickly forms part of what Tina was talking about before with regards to a strategy. So we can have a strategy, but if you've not got the ownership, the strategy is going to fail. In the same way you can have the ownership, but if you've not got a strategy, your ownership is just meaningless because it's just continually topping up what's going into the system.
Thank you. Interesting. And Tina, what challenges are you seeing?
Yeah, I would just add to that, absolutely spot on. You need the accountability and the ownership, particularly in the business. I would just add that on top of that, sponsorship is most critical because there are going to come times when there are going to need to be tough decisions made, particularly around data archiving, particularly around data integration. And this concept that I hear often around the needs for executives for real-time insights and access. I'm not sure if that's really a requirement in every case. It's just something that people tend to say. And I think having a business sponsor to help make sense of the noise and to be the voice of reason amongst various data friends and data advocates across the company. I think that's super important, particularly having someone from the business sponsor. Typically, I see that in S/4HANA transformations, it's a chief financial officer who's there and who sponsors the data strategy and who's willing to step up and make those tough decisions. But anyone at that level, I think, is needed in order for the strategy to be successful.
Thank you. And Nick, anything to add there on challenges that you see?
I think one of the biggest challenges that I see right now, especially with customers either going to Business Suite on HANA or S4 HANA, and typically going to a hyperscaler, is they've got a cost. They know what the cost of the migration is. They know how long it's going to take. But then they get onto the hyperscaler, and all of a sudden the month by month cost goes up because they're adding more and more data. And I see this all the time where the customer has started off with one perception of how much it's going to cost them to run the system, and then very quickly it becomes another scale in terms of more money for running exactly the same amount of data they thought they would start off with. And I'm seeing this time and time again that people are now questioning the cost of running it on a hyperscaler.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So obviously a lot of things for people to think about there. And just going back to a point you made earlier, Nick, around simplifying migrations and reducing TCO. How can the right data strategy help that?
Well, I think if you haven't got a data strategy to start off with, then poor old IT is left with, I've got all of this data. I really don't understand. I don't understand what I've got to do with it in terms of am I going to reduce it as I move to S4? Also, it's not just the size of it. How clean is that data? Do I need to clean my data up before I migrate it? And of course, the more data you've got, the longer a migration takes. So I think without a data strategy, the business is saying, okay, you're moving to S4, off you go and do it. But no data strategy means that IT have got to put a lot of effort in trying to get this thing moved to S4. And again, we're seeing this all the time. That and it's quite interesting. I may ask Tina a question in a minute. How many companies where she talks to with SAP actually have a data strategy? Because I see very few that have a data strategy in place right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great concept, but you're right. In terms of practice, in terms of actually sitting down and working together with all the various stakeholders to define a data strategy is something that I think companies are lacking. I would put my guess probably 20% of the companies that I work with have one. But what was recently identified in a Gartner study of CDOs was that even if you have a chief data officer and they have a data strategy, well, guess what? It's probably old. It's probably something that was done years and years ago and sitting on a shelf somewhere in PowerPoint slides. So very few companies really kind of take that as an ongoing activity, that a data strategy should be part of a journey, right? It shouldn't just be a one and done exercise, but needs to be able to evolve and pivot and adjust as the business challenges adjust. And I think that's where companies are missing it, that it's not just a one-time exercise for a big transformation project like a move to S/4HANA or an acquisition or whatnot, that it needs to be living and breathing and be sponsored and be a tool that can be used then in various programs and projects over time, not just a one-time deal. And I would offer that, in addition to looking at TCO as a benefit, a strategic benefit of data, particularly as companies transform and become more digital, there's process transformation work. And with that comes cost savings and effectiveness, not to be forgotten as one of the other drivers, value drivers for data work, is that there are a lot of process efficiencies. There are a lot of revenue opportunities where data can help drive new markets, can help drive new revenue opportunities. And now we're hearing more companies think about how do you monetize the value of data. That's a big trend now, and I think that's helpful too, to begin to think about, how do you put a pound value or a euro value on a data set. I think that's an interesting exercise.
Hi, it's Beth from the SAP User Group. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you're not a member and you'd like to make your job easier, whilst ensuring your company gets the best value from its investment in SAP, join our community of over 7,000 SAP customers. For more information and a special offer for our podcast listeners, please visit sapusers.org/pod or email support@sapusers.org.
Excellent. I suppose that also links back to what we were talking about earlier about increasing the costs in hyperscalers. Okay, it may be that as Mark said, we're victims of cheaper data storage, but when you're looking to move to somebody else's data, so the more you put on, the more it's going to cost. And Mark, is there anything you can add around that simplification and reducing TCO with the right data strategy?
What I've started doing with some of my teams now is I've set them a challenge, which is, why have you got so many open purchase order lines? Can we consolidate purchase orders? Okay. So not only do we get the efficiency of data, but we're also getting the operational efficiency as well. Instead of doing 10 or 15 transactions within the warehouse, we're doing one. Yeah. So it's not only about what are we physically doing with the keystrokes, but it's what we're physically doing in that real world, not the virtual world as well. And how can what we do in the real world impact our virtual world within SAP? So there's all sorts of things that we can do as we roll forward. So if we have a data strategy, how can we measure that data strategy so that it doesn't become just a strategy, it becomes an operational plan? Yeah. So if I've got 98% of my purchase orders in SAP are delivered, invoiced, closed, why do they still need to be there? I'm using 98% of that table space for nothing. Because I can take it off to an archive and I can still report on an archive for historical reporting. Why does it need to be there in live? Let's take the stuff out of live that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah,
It makes
that's a
more
great
sense.
point. That's a great point. I see a lot of companies afraid to do that. So I think that's a great, smart bit of advice, is to really focus and think about what data do you need in order to drive those business processes, to simplify those transactions, and the rest of it, frankly, should be archived, right? It should be put aside for legacy reporting capabilities, not to confuse and confound the day-to-day operations. It's just, reducing the whole idea of simplification. It's just making it worse. And so when companies look to move to S/4HANA, there you go, right? There's that opportunity to think about how do you simplify the business processes first And with that will come the data simplification.
Okay, and whilst we're on that point, we've talked about customers looking to go to S4HANA, and what are some of the important data activities that customers need to really have front of mind to support their move? I'll stay with you on that one, Tina.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about process simplification and focus and archiving. I think it's a big need. The other side of it would be thinking about what foundational wide capabilities do you have in place that might have been put on the shelf a bit? So for example, data governance and data quality management, those capabilities are ever so important as you look to make a big move and transform your business operations. So is there still a focus on those foundational activities? Do they need to be dusted off, right? Do you need to take a rethink about how you govern your data? And do you need to take a rethink about how you monitor and manage the quality of your data? And do you have all the right standards and policies and accountabilities? We talked about that earlier. Are those all in place? Because they might have been years ago, but they may not be up to date. So taking a look at that, I think, is an important part of the preparation. It's not going back to the basics a bit, but it's important because you need to have those capabilities in place, as you're getting ready for the move.
Thank you. And Nick, anything to add there?
Well, the only thing I add is that a lot of people going from ECC 6 to S4, they've had that ECC 6 system a long time. Probably at least 10 years. What you've got is some old business processes, as Tina says. You need to start looking at your business processes and actually see if S4 can help you here. Again, as Tina mentioned, data quality. We see it all the time in that people. It's the old adage, garbage in, garbage out. Why move rubbish into S4? Have a clean up before you go, quite frankly.
Thank you. And Mark?
I've actually wrote 3 things down on a piece of paper when I was reminiscing about an SAP implementation I did in 2006. And if I was to do it again today, what would I do differently? So if we think back to 2006, a lot of businesses went down the route of, we're not changing our processes, that's too hard to do. It's easy to change the code and we change the system. Okay, so now I'm older, wiser and wider, I've kind of come to the conclusion of we need to remove customizations. Okay. And we need to look at data archiving and we need to look at data cleansing. So those are kind of the 3 things that firmly stuck in my mind when I was reminiscing over the past. And it's the customizations which I think are going to trip people up with Z tables and things like that. Because where are you going to shoehorn those in?
Yeah, and back to you flushing it through the bowl.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And, thank you very much. We're coming towards the end of our recording now, and doesn't time fly when you're having fun? It only seems about 5 minutes ago we started chatting. And what I'd just like to do is now just have a kind of quick fire round, and we've covered off so many important tips from you and learnings that we've had through this conversation. But just to finish off, I'd just like to have 1 tip from each of you. You can do 2 if you want. I'm not precious about it. Of how to get your data right. So I'm going to continue with you, Mark, where we finished off in the last question.
Okay, so in terms of getting it right, we've got to empower people to own that data. So it's more than having a strategy within the IT/IS department. It's actually driving that down into the business and setting the challenges so that we can optimize that data. If we've optimized the data before we go forward, we can actually turn that into information and we can make informed decisions on where we want to take our businesses. Because I think we've learnt anything over the past 12 months, it's the world has changed and it's going to change further, and it's going to become far more data driven.
Thank you very much. And Nick?
I agree with Mark. I'd get the business to own the data. I see too many cases where you go into a customer and you say who owns the data, and business look at IT look at the business. It's business data at the end of the day. Business own it. Business needs to sort their data out. What to keep, what to go.
Thank you. And finally, Tina.
I would just recommend that everyone that's considering this journey do a quick assessment and understand where are you today? Do you have the capabilities that you need to go forward? Do you have an archiving strategy? Do you know the quality of your data? Do you have accountable business resources? Do you have standards? Do you have et cetera, right? Do a quick assessment, because it's probably been a while since you've taken a look at data management for specific business processes. Take the time to get a sense of where are you today, and then use that to fuel your strategy and your roadmap going forward. And that way you can really understand where you need to go, and you can have the insight and input to build a plan of action.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. A couple of key things there I'm seeing themes running throughout what we've talked today about. Obviously, is how to create that data strategy, having the senior level sponsorship, and perhaps that's something we can take to a future event as well, and really drill into that with our members on helping them to draft and create that. And the other one is that very important relationship between the IT and the business, and making sure that working together and not just left, if you like, in IT's inbox to make this work, and just having that business and IT really working together to drive this forward. So I mean, the insights and learnings, I think, just from this short conversation have been exceptional. So I'd like to thank you all very, very much for giving us your time today, and for your insights and expertise. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to this episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it valuable. So until the next time, stay safe, stay well, and keep washing your hands.